Recently read a statistic somewhere regarding debt and lawsuits and how, on average, over 70% of debt has resulted in default judgments, oftentimes because the person ignored the lawsuit. This usually results in a default judgment and a wage garnishment, which is bad because now that person is on the hook for the full amount of the debt and sometimes even the attorney fees. This is when wage garnishment and property liens can happen in an attempt for the creditor to get their money back. If you are being sued for debt, or even if you need an attorney generated debt verification letter to mail out, I have linked both within the comments of this video and the description of this video a company that helps with this. They can help you prepare a legal answer without the added cost of hiring an attorney. Your answer actually gets reviewed by one of their attorneys. Even if you're trying to dispute debt, they can provide you with an attorney generated debt validation letter. So let's talk about how you can avoid a lawsuit to begin with, especially if it's tied to credit card debt. Recently, I was asked what to do if you still owe credit card debt to original creditors like American Express, Capital One, or Visa. And by this, I mean that the account's still with them and now you're in collection status with them. So if your debt is still being collected by these types of original creditors, I always recommend trying to settle the debt. Try to get that balance zeroed out if you can. Now, with the original creditors, if they still have your account, you're not going to be able to get pay for deletes. That's just not something that they do. If your goal is to apply for a home loan, the mortgage company, the bank, whomever you're getting your loan from, they're going to require that you take care of these types of charge offs. It's going to be extremely difficult to get a home loan when you have charge offs with balances reporting on your credit reports. Also, it's an auto decline for most lenders if you're going to go and apply for a credit card or a personal loan and you have charge offs, especially with balances reporting on your credit reports. So you can try to dispute a charge off that is with the original creditor. It may be a little bit more tricky since they typically have the proof that they need to show that it's yours. What they cannot do is report to the credit bureaus information that's in error, inaccurate, that could impact your ability to qualify for a loan or that could impact the interest rate that you get. So, should you decide to dispute a charge off with the credit bureaus, you're going to want to ask for verification or validation of the debt that's reporting on your credit report. Ideally, you want to find a reporting error or inaccuracy and then point this out in a letter to them. So your dispute letter will go to the original creditor, ultimately, who's now alerted of your dispute. So if they didn't have your current address on file, they will now. Because these credit card companies, especially American Express, Capital One, Visa, tend to do in-house collections, they are known to sue. And I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm seeing this happen to more and more people. And I'm going to share with you some things you can do to try to prevent this from happening. So some of these credit card companies will sell your debt to debt buyers, and debt buyers will take ownership of the debt and then they try to sue you. But these big credit card companies, the ones that I've mentioned, again, American Express, Capital One, and Visa, they don't do that very often. Instead, they'll hire law groups to go after you. So, contrary to what a lot of people think, they can get permission from the court to mail to you letters to the last address that they have on file for you. If they try to serve you but can't because you're either dodging them, you're not answering your door, or whatnot. I see a lot of people who have moved and they don't know that they've been served. And then the next thing they do know, their wages are being garnished because of a default judgment that they had no idea was ruled against them. So, because of this, I recommend that you make sure your current address is on your credit reports and that you don't try to hide from debt that really is legally yours, because I don't want to see you in this type of situation. Before these original creditors file a lawsuit, they'll send letters threatening to sue, but at this point, they have not filed the lawsuit yet. They'll get pretty aggressive with their collection attempts, just like collection agencies do. Their whole business model is similar to that of a collection agency. If you don't pay, they're going to sue, they're going to get a judgment against you and garnish your wages. That's what their model is. I've seen people being sued these days with original balances of just less than $1,000, very small. And then they also try to get their attorney's fees added on. The goal here then is if you have a credit card debt that's heading into collections and a charge off status, try to resolve this before the potential for a lawsuit or judgment. You can try to get these types of accounts disputed with the credit bureaus and removed from your credit reports. That does not change the fact, though, that the account, if it's truly yours, it's yours, and that the debt owed is yours. And I say this because one of the most common mistakes that I see are people assuming that if they get a collection account or a charge off account with balances owed off of their credit report, it's removed, that they no longer owe the debt. And that is simply not true. So I don't want you to listen to people who say that you no longer owe a debt once it's charged off, because you do. So, when is it a good time to try to reach out if you are going to settle a charge off? You need to understand the whole debt collection process, and I'll sum it up for you. The first 90 to 120 days is when, payment is late and overdue. The creditors will contact the debt collector to try to help them collect. Now, there's a difference between a debt collector and a debt buyer. A debt collector is typically just a company that the original creditor has hired to call you and try to get you to make a payment. A debt buyer has actually purchased the debt from the credit card company, and the transfer of ownership has been assigned to them. So again, Capital One, American Express, Visa, they typically don't sell your debt. They hire a collection company to help them collect on it, and they'll pay them a fee to do so. And sometimes they'll even have a second or third collection company. So if the first collection company is not able to collect anything from you, then they'll go to the second collection company or the third collection company requesting help. So sometimes you'll see a collection account and it's changing hands on your credit report because it's the original creditor is changing the collection company that is responsible for helping to collect on your debt. This is where I see collection accounts and charge off accounts, like people get these things removed off of their credit report. And then down the road, these same accounts reappear on the credit report. And sometimes it's because the collection agency has changed. The original creditor now has another collection agency trying to help them collect. And so that new collection agency is reporting your debt because to them it is new, it's a new file, and so they're reporting the debt again to the credit bureaus. So once an account has gone 6 months without payment on it, the creditor charges it off. And so for a charge off, it's an internal tax status of debt. It doesn't mean that the creditor is saying that they're no longer going to try to collect on this. So after 6 months or 180 days of no payment, for example, Capital One will charge off debt stating that it's a loss on their books, but then they'll still try to collect on it. They'll keep it in house and they'll continue collection efforts. You can still settle a charge off with them. If they receive money from you after they've charged off your account, then they need to amend their tax documents to show that they're not counting it as a loss any longer. So I just would not recommend ignoring a charge off because with these credit card companies, their collections can and often do turn into filed lawsuits. Between the time of the charge off and then there's this 6 month window before some of them actually start filing lawsuits, sometimes years can pass. Some of these original creditors are quite aggressive and they'll file very quickly. Others will perhaps wait a few years before they take any action. So there's this law called the statute of limitations, really important for you to know. It's abbreviated as SOL. So in each state, there is a timeline as to how long lawsuits can be filed from the time that the account charges off and goes into default. So you really want to check your state's SOL, because that's another mistake I see people making. They assume that just because this SOL period passes, they can no longer be sued for a debt. But the lawsuit may have already been filed within the SOL time frame, and that basically stops the clock. So you really want to check with the court. I would recommend checking with the court that's local to the zip code in which the account was originally opened, and then checking in the court local to you if you have moved, so that you can just see if there's anything pending for you when it comes to charge offs and collections. You want to make sure you're not being sued. Right before a charge off occurs, you may get letters directly from the original creditor with different types of settlement offers. And sometimes these are some pretty good proposals, and you might want to actually consider them. I've seen lump sums, I've seen payment plans where the original creditor is proposing 40 to 50% of the total due. And if you have the ability to do that, then you might want to consider taking it at that point. Once the debt has been charged off, you're eventually going to get these pre-litigation type letters. And these are letters that come from the attorney's office that represents the credit card company. And they're going to start sending you these letters asking if you dispute the validity of the debt, and they may also include settlement offers. That's also a good time to either reach back out to them or the original creditor and request a settlement, make a settlement proposal that works for you. I've seen 20 to 30% of uh, settlements on debts that have been owed. You do have some leverage here. And I say that because attorney's fees, litigation, court costs, these things add up for a creditor when they are filing a lawsuit. So while they may be threatening to sue, they're also having to hire these outside law firms, and they're expensive. So there is an incentive for the creditor to get this resolved before it gets to that point. Also, a lot of times with a judgment, unfortunately, people end up having to file for bankruptcy, and then the original creditor just won't get anything, and they know that's a possibility. So, again, you do have some leverage here. Hope this helps.